Everybody, make a rocket ship go now. I am Robert Ogilvy, executive strategist and EQ coach, and I'm glad you could join me today. So, today's question, why is it critical to have both red work and blue work? Okay, so you may have heard me mention these terms in other videos, but what I mean by that is red work is anything that is action oriented or is in a typical kind of pre-outlined kind of linear way of operating that business. And then the blue work is anything that would be reflection, learning, modification, kind of strategy based. You're working on the business, you're reconceiving certain parts, you're questioning certain assumptions, right? Okay, so why is it critical for this to happen? So I'm just going to quickly tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then proceed to tell you that for the next 9 or 10 minutes. So it's important because first of all of us need to reflect and act to some degree, and that need is going to differ, but all of us need to reflect and act. It's important because mid-career you will hit a kind of slump, a kind of wall, a kind of block or barrier if you are doing pure blue or pure red work, and I'll talk about what that looks like. And then lastly, to hit the real pinnacle of both learning and performance, a flow state requires both of these. So I'll talk more about why that's needed. Okay, so first of all, everyone has some amount of action reflection, and part of this is I was thinking more about OODA loops, and I was thinking more about how there's trait-like qualities in introversion, extroversion. So the good thing is introversion, extroversion is somewhat plastic, so it can somewhat be changed over time. But in my mind, that's like, okay, 10% over, a year and a half, 2 years, if you're really putting effort into it, and maybe 20% over longer periods of time. But even that is just a rough kind of made up rubric to kind of wrap your brain around, right? The point is, we all have some degree of this, and I really like the Carl Jung quote that's saying, like, listen, if there was someone that was a pure introvert or a pure extrovert, they would be crazy. They would be unworkable to deal with, right? And honestly, I'm a strong extrovert, and so, but I like good data. I like nerdy stuff, and that's often when good data isn't just exciting, which it always is for me, but when it can really kind of stun me in some sense and get me to have to reorient and like accommodate to some new problems. Like, ooh, well, that's really quite interesting, right? But we need both of those, and all of us can relate to that. We can all relate to some degree that our even in our roles, even in our profession, that there would be some amount of action, some amount of reflection, right? And so we wouldn't even want to design a role that would be that lopsided, right? This is native to all of us, and so in that way, you could think of part of the battle is how do we kind of weave this into our work, where which parts of our job are blue and which parts of our job are red, right? Um, there's a lot more we could go into in terms of optimizing this based on kind of personality traits and the traits you're bringing into us, but that's enough for now. Um, so let me go to the second point. And the premise here is that really it's like managers need to be able to blend red and blue work, but particularly executives is kicked up a notch, right? And so if it ever feels like the challenge for executives is inordinate and high, yeah, frankly, not everyone is cut out to do this, right? And that's the difference between Bobby the coach that just wants everyone to be at kind of good cognitive performance, whatever they want to do, versus Bobby the executive EQ coach, which really it's like, no, I need to prepare you to do high level executive work, right? Okay, so here would be the two extremes of that. Roles that are overly blue, too heavy on the blue end of things, they end up having a title that's like analyst something, senior analyst. Um, Sometimes they'll use terms that are planning related. Certainly, most academics are too much on the blue end of things. But if you're too much on the blue, that means it's like it becomes theory for the sake of theory, and you're no longer being interested in application. I saw a great article in the past week that was looking at even AI researchers. So really, just to break down some of the guts of this, this is the more advanced aspects of machine learning, and so it's a lot of like computer science algorithms, right? And they are so interested in the novelty of finding some new algorithm, which more has to do with how you intellectually differentiate in like publishing and academic circles, that they're not interested in dealing with kind of crunchy, pragmatic, useful, high impact solutions, right? And so you could see how, the normal population, normal 80% of people would look at that and be like, what the hell are you doing? This is too much head work for not enough ROI, right? Or it can also start to feel, when blue work starts to become very curmudgeonly and competitive, but yet low stakes, that's another good sign that you've gotten too far off the deep end, right? That this has become kind of intellectually petty, but kind of useless, right? And again, I say this with love because so many of my friends are like grad level researchers and engineers, and these are brilliant people, but they often have to build these other skills if they're going to get the applied side of it. On the blue end of things, what it tends, I got the terms for, sorry, color, yes, that was blue work, yes. On the other end of things, if it's too much on the red end of things, what it'll feel like is that there's no place for questioning your work. And here might be the big difference. I think often we ourselves, when we work in a role, there's naturally a kind of job crafting impulse that we want to improve and innovate it. And often my sense is that the top-down pressure is what makes the job overly red. But there are some professions that are very much like that. And honestly, these are probably not the people which are concerned about, oh, I'm a, is how good is my business strategy? How good is my product management, right? But I mean, look at the day-to-day jobs that you see, and a lot of them really like and need that structure to some degree. And oh, good, so that's red work. That's using good set processes. Um, I, I'm still want to keep this in kind of a management lens, so I'm going to use the example of ENTJs and ESTJs. If you look at um, money, income, by decade, by personality type, so 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, etc., you'll see that it's the ENTJs and the ESTJs that jump up really quick, right? Why? Because they're energetic and they have a sense of, they're EJs, so they're strong, energetic sense of command. And actually, they're both actually dealing with a good amount of TE, extroverted thinking, which is like productivity-oriented thinking and kind of strong convergent processes to get something done, time-efficient thinking. And processes. And either coming from a lens of, an introverted intuition, which is like, big macro pattern recognition and strategizing, or introverted sensing, which is kind of like tradition and conservatism and risk management. So yeah, these people jump up really quickly in their careers, but they do cap off, and in a number of sense. The obvious way they cap off is they cap off in their earning potential because they're no longer learning and developing. So the reason they're capping off is really because there's not a lot of new skills they have to offer. So hopefully that added managerial experiences can help unlock some other doors, but they're really not doing anything intellectually new that they haven't done since they were a rather young age, right? Maybe 25 or 22, right? And to say that to someone that might be 35 to 40 years old and they haven't learned a new skill since they're 22, like that's kind of, it becomes kind of pathetic. Whereas the other types, which basically have higher trait openness, are able to, if they can do their job right, continue learning and developing. They have more blue elements that they can weave into their work, so they keep getting better. Anyway, all that is to say, you will hit a kind of mid-career slump if you can't blend red and blue elements into your work, right? Last point, a flow state requires red and blue amped up to the maximum. Why? Because it's a natural merging of action and awareness, right? You need to be both doing and like learning and kind of metacognitively aware at the same time. And it's not like flow states are bad or frantic, just the opposite. You actually feel in command of this and like it's naturally flowing out of you. As you've heard me mention in other videos, part of the reason a flow state can happen is that you have such developed mental models that when something pops up, you're so well oriented that you reasonably know what to do, or is at a reasonable level of challenge, right? And which means flow states are max red work performance as well as max blue work learning and metacognitive awareness, right? That's the jam, right? And so in some sense, we're not just trying to individually psychologically train ourselves for this. We're trying to set up context, particularly I'll say work context, team context, the kinds of data and problem and issues in the nature of our work context that are going to bring us towards that, right? And those are not just the, externally the highest ways we can add value to others, the most, you could think of the most productive, but the most impactful way to others, but they're also the stuff that's most meaningful for us, right? And the more we have a taste of that, the more that natural sense of high priority kind of calcifies as a kind of sense of purpose and meaning making. You're like, oh, well, this is the jam. Why am I doing this B and C string stuff that that I could be doing, but oh wait, that's not what I wanted. This is the main jam, right? It's us trying to get back to those flow states. So I'm just going to quickly try to recap. We all have innately can touch into this notion of being able to reflect and act, and that's native to all of us. So we can all get that. Second of all, you'll hit a mid-career slump if you're only doing red or only doing blue work. Certain personality types are worse for that. And lastly, flow states are the ultimate blending of red and blue work. So if you can max out both of those, awesome flow state. Again, I'm Robert Ogilvie, executive strategist and EQ coach, and I will see you